Welcome back to Shock's Talks. I'm Shakti, and today we're talking about a psi phenomena called seeing without eyes. I first learned about this through Tom Campbell's work, and basically, there's a woman in Germany who started training children in this ability to see without eyes. And what they do is they wear these special blindfolds. This is just a regular eye mask, but she trains them to see through it somehow. So let's get into it. Seeing without eyes. I've linked for you this short documentary below, and it's posted on Tom's channel. And this friend of the community, the MBT community, Oliver, went to Germany and met with the woman and met with some of the children and interviewed them. And so you can listen to them talk about their skills and you can see demonstrations of it. But basically, the kids are wearing these very thick blackout blindfolds. The filmmaker and others are able to try out the blindfolds for themselves, and it's pretty easy to tell just from looking at them that there's this thick foamy lining that creates a tight seal all the way around the eyes so no light can get in. And in this little documentary, you can see clips of the kids at play wearing these blindfolds and doing things like sorting cards into different piles based on the colors, or hitting the skee ball game, or even rock climbing. There's no feeling around. They're not using their other senses. You can tell that they're just operating the way they would if they were just seeing with their eyes. And when one of the kids is asked what he's seeing while blindfolded, he mentions that with the rock climbing activity, sometimes the little holds that you grab onto appear even closer to him. So it's like he has a zoom lens in a way when he's looking through the blindfold. And there were other little distortions like that with other kids as well. So basically, they start this is how the learning process goes. They start working with the masks, and the first step is to see a small dot of light in the darkness. Then this dot expands, making the area of the mask more transparent. So you just have a little peephole at first, and then it starts to open and you see more and more. For some people, it starts off as two of these peepholes, one for each eye, and then it expands out. And apparently, this process takes different amounts of training and time for each person. And there are children and adults who are learning these skills. So, for one of the kids' moms, for example, it takes her a few minutes for the hole to open up. And for a lot of the kids who do this, it just takes a couple of moments. And then they're seeing as if the mask wasn't even there. Sometimes they described like a little bit of a frame though around it so that they're actually seeing within like the frame of what these of where these blindfolds end on their face. And the filmmaker Oliver interviews two preteen girls. They're like 12 and 13, I think. One of them just wanted to learn the skill because her brother was learning it. A lot of the kids' parents learned about this through videos or things that they saw on the internet, and then they found out it was happening near them, and they just thought like, oh, let's train our kids and see what can happen. And I think a lot of them were already in like the My Big Toe Tom Campbell community, because he has a lot of different international followers who are interested in his work. And so basically the kids say that it's really surprising at first, but then you just get used to it. And when asked what the biggest difference was between regular eyesight and perception with the mask on, one girl says basically nothing. She said it was dreamlike at first when she was learning, and then it became totally normal in terms of like what things looked like. Interestingly, for the girl who wears glasses in normal life, her mask sight is slightly off in proportion. So she couldn't really say if it was zoomed in or zoomed out when asked, but she said that, like, for example, if she saw a handrail in front of her and reached out to touch it, sometimes it would be a little bit off from where her hand went. So she would see the image of the thing perfectly and accurately, but she wouldn't be able to gauge its position in space in relationship to her body. And this is the girl that wore glasses in regular reality. So maybe there was some kind of connection between her perception around what sight is for herself as someone who was a little bit visually impaired. One thing that's interesting about this is that some of the kids can see when they just close their eyes, but most of them, when they close their eyes and try to do the same skill, they just see colors. They don't see the pure, accurate picture. And so the way the kids talked about it, they feel like there's something to do with the light, because the mask completely blocks out the light, and then it allows them to open that pinhole and see the full clarity of what's in front of them. And the interviewer asked them if they'd ever tried this skill in a dark room, and they said no. So maybe that's an experiment that they can do. Some of the kids can see with their eyes closed, and the young girl that wore glasses was thinking that if she trained at this skill for long enough, she might be able to actually stop wearing glasses. Another interesting thing is that a lot of the kids are just doing the training and they're not really trying to apply the skill in any different ways, but some of them did start to experiment with sort of looking through walls. So, for example, if I'm in this room and I have the mask on and I'm looking around and I see, like, okay, this is, you know, my phone is on a stand in front of me and there's a ring light and there's, I see the walls of the room and the doors, but some kids could actually start to see through the walls with the mask on. So that's kind of interesting. And yeah, it's just a very short little documentary. So if you're curious about this, I do recommend checking it out. I also linked her website, the German website and the English website, and a couple other videos, a Tom Campbell video where he also talks about this. And his episode is called Psi Demystified, and he's talking about how MBT, my big toe, his theory of everything, explains this phenomena. So he says it's like remote viewing, which we've been talking about a lot in this season 2, the psychic season, but it's more like remote seeing. So it's collecting data from a database. In his concept, consciousness is the computer, and we are all pieces of consciousness. We are, quote unquote, logged on to an avatar and playing this game. And these are all metaphors. He's not talking about an actual computer. He's not saying that we're in a simulation in the way that some people think of it. He's saying that this is a consciousness system, and simulations and computer games are good metaphors to help us understand some aspects of the reality that we're experiencing within. So remote viewing, he mentions how undeniable it is. And if you do even just a few minutes of research on the internet, you'll find tons of information about it. There have been so many books, so many hundreds of hours of rigorous scientific testing around remote viewing, and it's pretty hard to deny that that's a true skill. So he's saying that this is just another version of that. And that's what I like about his theory. The terminology doesn't really matter. Any psychic or paranormal ability fits within his theory because it's all just different ways of accessing consciousness. And if consciousness is the computer, or kind of like the ocean, and we're drops of water in the ocean, we are units of that consciousness. We have access to it even beyond the boundaries of the game or the life or the current reality system that we're functioning within, or that we're primarily focused within. So one of the things he mentions is that because kids are less developed in terms of their belief systems, it's easier for them to learn these skills. So you censor the data that comes to you and you look for what falls within your belief system, according to Tom Campbell. And belief can be like a trap. It blocks us from seeing past it because it defines our reality. So this filmmaker, Oliver, mentions that when he was visiting those kids and interviewing them in Germany, he observed a 5-year-old learning the skill in just 5 minutes. And they were both saying that, yeah, the younger they are, the easier it is because there's less in the way. So let's think about this for a minute. Belief and the limitations on our reality, and also the moral implications of developing a skill set like this. Tom Campbell mentions that he has this thing in his theory called the psi uncertainty principle. And it's almost, in my mind, I understand it to be almost like like a guardrail on psi abilities. So you'll hear stories, for example, of someone being able to levitate while they're meditating alone in their room, but they can't prove it or they can't show it to anyone. And most people would just say, like, well, that's obviously just not real and it's not happening. But let's just imagine for one moment that for some reason we have access to the data and we're able to observe that actually it is real. They are levitating when they're alone and nobody's watching them, but they can't do it when it's time to perform. And this could be because of the psi uncertainty principle. And basically, my understanding is that there are limits to the reality system because there is a purpose to existing within it and all that we're doing here. So, for example, if you are able to start to be a great remote viewer and then you started using your skills to just like spy on people in a way that wasn't really morally appropriate or was harmful or detrimental in some way, maybe you would stop having that skill. Or like if you, I don't know, if you started to develop the ability to influence matter with your mind and you were telekinetic and you were using this power to basically mess things up or again cause harm in some way, maybe that skill wouldn't really stick around. The way Tom Campbell talks about it is that basically the consciousness system is waiting for a certain amount of people to level up in consciousness at the being level to kind of evolve to a more loving place where it's most probable that we will make loving choices and safe, good, positive choices. And as that happens, more and more people come online to more and more abilities because they can handle them better and they can use them better. And there's no way to really prove this part of the theory, I don't think, but it does sound interesting to me, and I suppose it could make sense if the nature of consciousness were such that it itself was interested in our development and who we are and how we use our choice making power. So I suppose that's what he's asserting on a certain level, is that consciousness is not just a machine, it's not just a computer, but it's something that actually cares about what we do while we're here. Let's hear a quote from him and have him put it in his own words.
But will we get there? I don't know. It just depends on whether we as a population can accept this data and work with it positively, that we won't abuse it. We won't go to places that we shouldn't. We won't violate other people's privacy. We won't do these things in a major way. Yes, they happen in the margins, and as long as it's in the margins, psi uncertainty principle doesn't mind too much. If it becomes a massive thing where it's not in the margins, it's in the mainstream, well, then we just have to wait and see whether or not we are capable of having that now, or whether we're just going to have to wait a while until we grow up. And as we grow up, these things will become available to us. So I know that's not really a great answer that people would like to hear. They'd like to hear something that's hard and fast because it's a machine, and a machine always works this way. This is not a machine. This is consciousness. It's a larger conscious system, which is a conscious, intelligent thing. It's running a virtual reality of which this physical universe of ours is that virtual reality.
So it's interesting. I mean, this kind of makes me think about manifesting, and maybe I'll do an episode on that because it's kind of a hot topic in the mainstream, and it has been for a while now, ever since The Secret came out. And it's something that really grosses a lot of people out when they hear this term manifestation, because people are so materialistic about it and so silly about it and kind of delusional sometimes. But I think manifestation is a great example of how there are ways in which we can modify future probabilities through our intent, as Tom Campbell would say in his theory. However, there are also limits to that based on the system itself can intervene, and the system itself sometimes has different plans for us. So I think I've said this before. I know I've said it in my life. I don't know if I've said it on the channel, but one of the things about working on a manifestation is that you may think you know what you want or need in your life, and so you're working towards manifesting that thing, and you may be successful, or sometimes maybe you're not, and it feels like really bad and really wrong and really like, what did I do wrong and why didn't this happen for me, and I did all the right steps and I took all the advice and I did everything exactly the way they said I should, and it still didn't happen. Well, I think what Tom Campbell has said and what I believe based on my own experience and other things I've read, I think that we're not meant to control everything in this reality that we're living within. We're meant to interact with it and have some impact on it, and it's going to have some impact on us, but it's a give and take. It's kind of like a relationship, you know? You're not going to just push your love partner around and make them into what you want them to be and force them to be the way you want them to be. It's a give and take. You kind of go back and forth with boundaries and asking for what you want and need, and also making room for the fact that they're also a person and they have their own wants and needs. And sometimes you need to see it their way and not just your own way. And I think the larger consciousness system might be similar in the sense that it maybe, let's just say it does love us and it wants the best for us, but we don't even know what that is. And we don't know why we signed up for this life and what we were meant to do while we were here. But it knows and it has a plan. And so sometimes that plan includes learning a hard lesson, or not getting your way, not getting what you want, or, you know, dealing with failure, or, you know, dealing with loss or anything else that can happen to us while we're alive. So I think the psi uncertainty principle could also help to explain why there seem to be these laws of reality, but they have these wiggly edges that you can't quite pin down. And maybe that's just because there is a sort of a greater plan, you could say, on the part of the system itself. Sounds very religious, and it kind of is. It's kind of the same stuff that is talked about in religion, but that's the interesting part about looking into the edges of our current scientific understanding, is that the further out you get, the more philosophical and the more religious it starts to become. So anyway, I hope you found this episode interesting. Seeing without eyes is a strange little side kind of version of remote viewing, which we've talked a lot about and will continue to talk about. And I think what it opens up is the understanding that even though remote viewing is a very strict protocol that works within a certain set of steps and includes like an interviewer and includes being able to look at the target afterwards and check your work and all of these things, this seeing without eyes is similar in the sense that there is a training process, there is a visualization protocol when it comes to these little pinholes of light that you see and then open up, and it is verifiable. The children are blindfolded and reading off of a page in this video that I linked below, and you can just watch it happening. And, you could probably argue that there's some trick to it, but I don't think there is. I think it's a very real phenomena that can occur within this strange reality that we're all a part of. So let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And if you have any other ideas about interesting sci phenomena that we haven't talked about yet on this channel. Thank you, as always, for listening, and I'll see you next time on Shocks Talks.